In today's Destiny Friday video, I'm going to explain why I firmly believe that SoH Spark of Hope Maul is the best character ever designed in all of Star Wars Destiny. A huge shout out to our channel members for supporting what we do here. If you want to get involved with the channel and the Dice Commando community, please consider joining as a channel member. Remember, these videos are only possible with your support. You can show that support with a like, a subscribe, and by leaving us a comment and sharing your feedback. Community first, and go Commando. Hey there, my Star Wars Destiny friends. Welcome back to Dice Commando and the Commando cast, and that's right, happy Destiny Friday, yet another Destiny Friday. So, admittedly, this is kind of an odd video to follow up on release weekend with, right? We have a brand new A-Rate set. So many awesome things in that set. It's a good looking set. A lot of really cool stuff out there. So, why in the heck would I use the next week to talk about an old card? Heck, this thing's been out for like 5 years now, probably 4 years, 4.5. I don't know. I should have looked that up before I talked out of my rear end. But either way, tonight we're talking SoH Maul, Maul Skilled Duelist. Now, there's certainly some bias in this discussion tonight. I would say over my career of competitive Destinies during the FFG days when we were actually going to tournaments and stuff like that, right? And I'm talking like organized play tournaments. This is certainly the deck, this is, if we were to go back and look at my career, I think this is probably one of the decks. I was responsible for Maul Mando. That was my deck. I'm known for that deck. I played the snot out of this character, and I love this character. So yes, there's bias there, of course. And when I say the best character ever designed, that's a pretty big statement, right? And I think it's true. And I'm not going to say it just because I enjoyed playing the character and I had success with the character. I think there's a very real reason why this character landed so well at the time it did and served the role that it did. Okay, so I am, of course, showing the promo version. I have one of these promo cards. Love it. Brenton brought it up for me from it was Star Wars Celebration, I think, at the time. So it was a pretty... and it was an early release. And anyway, you don't care about all that. Let's shut up, Andrew, and get to it. Okay, so just to put this in context, there may be people out there watching this who are unaware. So 1620 with 13 health at the time, that was pretty decent at the time. These days, that would probably have to be at least a 14, maybe even a 15-point character. So he was what we considered to be a big, but he wasn't big enough that you couldn't pair him with a 10-pointer, or in the case of Maul Mando, a 9-pointer with Solidarity, or no, not Solidarity, sorry, Retribution, excuse me. Definitely Retribution. That was awesome if he removed his die. Okay. So what he did, you can see those big, chunky, beefy, and to be fair, looking at this, I don't know that we would consider those super chunky. They're definitely chunky, but they're not the chunkiest these days with, 1, 2, 2, 3, 1. That's still pretty chunky, right? But for a 20-point character, yeah. Anyway, power action, reroll one of this character's character or upgrade dice, right? So it worked with his lightsaber, which was, of course, thematic. You may discard a card from your hand to reroll that die again. If that die is showing melee, you may remove it to deal damage equal to its value to 2 characters. So obviously this is thematic as hell, right? Which fit right into the FFG thing. Okay, which they did a great... no one... FFG made a lot of missteps, but designing thematic and things that felt like Star Wars was not one of the things they misstepped on, right? So this nailed things on all cylinders. It felt great to play. Okay, great. That's the Wayback Machine, the Member Berry Machine, okay? Which, means a lot to me. I love this character. Brings back a lot of good memories. But why waste your time with this conversation today? And to admit, this is setting the stage for next week's video, which will be a discussion about multi-die value and stuff like that. And again, kind of speaking to how the game has changed and where it may lie today. Okay. Now, what this character did is one very specific thing. This character dealt damage. This is a 20-point character that was on the table, and his role, as your character, was to do something. And that something was win the game. And I feel that that's why this is... And how he did it was what made him great. But the role that he filled, right? You compare it to a lot of other characters out there that in of them, you look at like Rey and Kylo, right? The Reylo pair. They, as characters, were there to win the game. They worked off of each other. They bounced back and forth. But alone, they were not amazing. And again, Reylo is something we've talked a lot about over the years on how it was amazingly thematic. It was a greatly designed deck. Chef's kiss in terms of that, right? From the FFG days. And I would argue that they're probably the best pair ever developed. But in terms of single character, I think he takes the cake again because they're there for a purpose, which is to win the game, right? You can compare that to a lot of characters we saw over the course of the FFG days. You know, Aphra was a big one. Aphra was not there to win the game by herself. Aphra was there to facilitate something happening. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, right? But what cards like that end up leading to in the game of Star Wars Destiny is board spam or wides, or where you're playing a character with one die for the purpose of just doing something. And that certainly is, I mean, again, we as gamers, we are inherently degenerates. We're going to try and maximize the value on everything or try and get those edge case combos. That's what we do, right? But the core of Star Wars Destiny, the way the game was fundamentally designed and everything that got brought up through was your characters going into battle. Okay. Darth Maul in the SoH era, right? This was the 8th set of Star Wars Destiny. Okay. Is that right? Actually, this might have, yeah. This is right? The 8th set of Star Wars Destiny. Okay. Things had gone sideways many, many times, and they brought this character in to just be a character that did damage and won the game, right? He didn't have a power action that triggered off something else. He didn't have a static that triggered off something else. I mean, he did have a power action, but didn't trigger off something else, right? His power action was just to roll his own die and do damage, right? He did one thing, and that was win the game or lose the game, right? And when he went down, and sure, he had a partner with him, and you could do tricks with the partner, which is, okay, I'm going to run Watto, and we'll generate a bunch of money and put a bunch of big stuff on Maul, and then he'll just roll in and blah, blah, blah. That's completely fine, right? But Maul served his role. And I think that's why he's so great in that they're like, we want to design a character that just comes in and wins the game, and this is how we're going to do it, and here's how we're going to do it thematically, right? I don't think there's any other character that did it in that way because they can do it alone. And you look at, you know, even go back to like Han Rey, right? Awakening's Han Rey, right? Both of those characters in of themselves were okay at the time, but they weren't good unless they had an ambush weapon. And they weren't good unless you were employing tricks to get them to do it. And again, that's not a bad thing from a Destiny standpoint. That's a good thing from any TCG standpoint. And I'm not attacking that in any way, right? But they in them themselves were not the best characters ever designed, right? Because they needed other things to happen. Whereas Maul, you could pair him with anybody, and he still did the thing that he did. And he also, I feel, embodied the core of Destiny, which was, let's put our characters into battle. Maybe we'll throw some weapons on them. Maybe we'll throw some tricks, right? But we'll win the game. And I feel that we've deviated from this. I mean, FFG deviated from it basically starting in maybe Convergence, maybe Way of the Force, either way you want to go. It probably with Aphra, if we're being honest, so it would probably be, you know, Legacies, actually, if we're being honest. You started really getting into this like go wide, board spam. We don't use our dice to do damage. We'd use our dice to build more stuff. And then we get to this board state where just it's not physically possible to do the removal, and you get into it. And the other part of this character is the fact that he had, to a certain extent, limited built-in AoE damage, right? So if you were up against, let's say, a 3-wide, or a 4-wide, or hell, Ewoks, which was nom nom nom, I eat Ewoks for lunch, right? But if you run up against someone who's 3-wide, right? That's typically the reason you come in with 3-wide is you're trying to get bigger health barrier with which to build board state. And Maul specifically attacked that archetype because he didn't, right? His ability, the way it reads, is you have to resolve it against 2 characters. So if they only have 1 character, you would actually have to end up hitting your own character, right? And that's why it was super great into 3-wides, is because I can power action you 2, and I can power action you 2, and then you could actually mathematically divide the divided up to where indirect could wipe the board, or a board wipe that dealt one across the board or two across the board could kill everybody. And you could really maximize your value out of that, right? So this isn't just, right? This character did not create a situation where you just roll threes. I mean, rolling threes was awesome. Don't get me wrong, right? But this wasn't just a roll, die, smash, right? You had to think about where you put your damage. How what's the risk? Okay, I rolled a 2, or I rolled a 1. Should I discard the card for a 2? Right? The amount of thought that went into this character, the strategy of playing this character, and how it prepared you, set you up to attack multiple archetypes at the same time, is what made this character and the decks that this character enabled, in my opinion, the best position in all of Star Wars Destiny. And I don't believe that we have anything like this right now, right? If you go out and you look at the vast majority of characters out there, with the exception of like maybe Black Chrysanthemum, right? Yeah, we'll throw out Black Chrysanthemum, right? There's certain characters out there that are, he's probably actually one of the few, like, Rey, like even Big Rey, I'm just on Bigs right now, but like Big Rey, you kind of still need to like get things out, right? And again, it's a character that facilitates you doing things on the board. We don't have very many characters that on their own are just there to win the game anymore, right? And that very much gravitates then towards, and again, in combination with what I'll talk about next week, you get these situations where like, well, if my characters themselves can't win the game, why would I not just pull back and put out a bunch of stuff that can just overwhelm the board and win the game, right? And I very much believe that if we had a character like this one in ARH Destiny right now, that we'd have a very different meta. I really do, because Maul was in his own way, like in a straight up fight, Maul was fine. But the nice thing about him was how the deck itself, with no changes, could pivot and attack different archetypes just by making you decide how you distributed your damage, right? Not super high level stuff, right? I'm nowhere near the card player that a lot of these other folks who are topping the RH tournaments and stuff like that are, right? But we also need to remember that the core fundamentals of Star Wars Destiny were not designed to have a board full of supports. That is not how the core of the game was designed. They later changed things to try and get support, because we had the problem early on where we didn't have chips in the game. It's a true statement. We didn't have it there. So they changed things fundamentally. There was a very distinct value drop between Across the Galaxy. Sorry, Across the Galaxy was 6. Man, feeling like an old man. But between set 3 and set 4, there was a very clear drop in the valuation that they put on supports. I'm not going to go back and look at the episode because you don't care. It was like 6 years ago at this point, if not more. There's a very clear value episode that I did. You can show the EV on support die and the cost of those, right? It happened. And again, that's not a bad thing, right? They needed to rebalance the game to do what they wanted with the game. But it doesn't change the fact that the core fundamentals of this game, which we are working on today, okay, we're still working on that today, even on a completely different power level, completely different game design philosophy. We're still working off the same fundamental core, which is characters going into battle with each other. And if we do not want a situation in which we are constantly gravitating towards putting more dice on the table, regardless of the power or quality of those dice, right? It is a dice spam works in this game, mathematically. And I'll explain that next week why, right? We look at everything on EV, but dice spam, I actually haven't been able to put a number to it, but I'll explain it next week, and I don't want to get into it, okay? But characters like this, who can inherently bring AoE damage without it being a board wipe, multi-hit damage, whatever you want to call it, are so important as a check valve to the fundamentals of this game. And the fact that you can do it built in on a character is why I believe that Darth Maul served the best purpose in all of Star Wars Destiny that we ever saw. And I believe he was the best designed character we ever saw. So I'll end it there. I'll talk to you all next week. And go Commando.